And welcome. Sorry for the delay here. We had a couple of technical difficulties and we were finishing the Board of Commission committee meetings this afternoon, just finished about 20 minutes ago. So we are going to go ahead and get started. I see we have about 50 folks who have joined and more joining every minute. And so we want to welcome everyone to this uh, what we're calling an Ask Me Anything town hall. Ask me, and we got some special guests here this evening who are going to, go through the presentation and be available to ask us to answer the questions based on anything that you ask. I know that folks are still joining in the waiting room. And I think we're letting them in as they arrive. But first off, let me just greet everyone. My name is Commissioner Ted Terry, your Super District 6 Commissioner. I'm honored to have this opportunity today, this evening, to connect with you directly and hear your thoughts and your questions and your concerns about the proposed water and sewer rate increase, as well as the amendments that have been introduced. First off, let me just begin by saying that we know how critical this is right now. We know how important water is to the livelihoods of all DeKalb County residents. Water is life. And I know many of you are concerned about what a rate increase will mean for your families, for your budgets, and for our community as a whole. And that's why we're here tonight. We want to have an open, honest conversation about how we can move forward in a way that's fair, transparent, and equitable. Let's be clear that we know that we are facing really big challenges with our aging water and sewer system. We have decades of wear and tear coupled with a current federal consent decree that is requiring us to take action. This action is to modernize this vital infrastructure, but we also understand that we can't and we don't want to do this on the backs of our most vulnerable residents. And this is why that we've proposed and introduced amendments that would address policies that protect our low-income ratepayers, ensure accountability, and provide transparency. Before we begin, let me quickly walk you through some of the updates that have happened in the last week. And as many of y'all probably are aware, based on my email and some of the articles in the AJC or Decatur-ish, will know that the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee did recommend some amendments to the water and sewer rate increase agenda item. And I'm going to walk through 5 of those 6 amendments that we're going to talk about today, as well as the larger plan that's being put forward. So first off, number 1, the amendment that would create a water customer advocate office by 2026 to help resolve billing disputes and improve customer service. This is something that we've seen other jurisdictions like Baltimore's Water and Sewer Authority have created in the last couple of years that have been very, very impactful to create a clearinghouse and an advocate for any customer that might have an issue with their bill, with repairs, as well as just overall feedback for the overall operation. Second, we want to fully fund the DeKalb Cares discount program. This is a discount program that the administration has presented to the Board of Commissioners that would help low-income residents by creating discounts on their rate structure based on their ability to pay, as well as their average median income, also referred to as AMI. Number 3, preventing water shutoffs for residents that are in the dispute process, and then reestablishing a 7-year payment plan option. This is very crucial because as we move forward in creating the Water Customer Advocate Office, we want to delay any shutoffs until such time as the Water Customer Advocate Office and system can be created. We think this is a fair and appropriate thing to do because as we talk about rate increases, we also are cognizant that over the last several years, there are still individuals and customers that are still in dispute or still have concerns with past bills. Number 4, conducting a full operational audit of the watershed department to be completed by January 2026 to ensure that every dollar is spent efficiently and responsibly. This type of audit is different than what you might hear from a financial or a forensic audit. An operational audit is the nuts and bolts. It's the operations. It's how we deliver projects on time and on budget. I am proud to say that as a member of the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee, We have had a lot of contracts that have come through our committee, over $1 billion worth at this point, and we regularly send those contracts to audit on a case-by-case basis. However, the operational audit would provide an opportunity for there to be a full-fledged review, best practices, ways to make sure that every dollar is spent as efficiently as possible. And then number five, developing a sustainability focused master plan for the Polebridge wastewater treatment facility. This is one of our lesser known treatment facilities. It's over in the southeastern part of DeKalb County. The facility is a wastewater treatment plant, as well as 300 acres of mostly grassland that is in the watershed inventory. And we are very interested in ways that we can better utilize this land that would benefit the larger community, as well as focusing on sustainability policies and goals related to solar, to composting, and to other ways to mitigate our greenhouse gas emissions. And then finally, that we will touch on a little bit here is the discussion currently is how we're going to pay for it. And so that's going to be another big part of our discussion here tonight. So before I introduce our guest speakers here who will run through a presentation, I want to let everyone know that we are going to answer your questions live here on the Zoom. And so this is a webinar, but what we want folks to do is to use the Q&A option. And what we will do is if you would like to, we will elevate you. So if you have a question and answer, we will begin to go through them in the order they're received, and we will elevate you to the webinar to ask your question here on the Zoom so everyone can hear it. I don't want to filter anybody's questions. I want to make sure that everyone has whatever they want to say in mind. And so what we will do is just use the Q&A function in the webinar. We'll go through those one at a time. And then certainly the folks that asked questions on the Airtable form, we will try to get to those. And if not, we will respond back to your questions in a follow-up document in writing. The last thing I will say, though, is because I did get several emails today about concern that we were rushing to take action on this agenda item. And just as a quick update, the commissioners did vote today to defer this discussion and this agenda item to the last meeting in January 2025. We wanted to make sure that there was an ample time for our new commissioners for District 7, District 3, and District 4 to get up to speed, to hear from their constituents, and allow for our new and incoming CEO, Lorraine Cochran Johnson, to also have an opportunity to participate in the discussion. So I hear you. I know folks were concerned that we were rushing, and this is just part of the legislative process. And part of that is putting amendments forward, continuing discussion. And as of this time, there is no official recommendation from the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. So with that being said, I would like to first introduce our guests here this evening. They will go through a presentation that might be about 10, 15 minutes-ish. A lot of figures, a lot of facts. So don't worry if you have a lot of questions. Just kind of take notes. Feel free to use the Q&A or the chat function, and we can follow up sort of accordingly. So first off, let me introduce Director David Hayes. He is the director of our watershed department. We also have with us our Chief Financial Officer, Dianne McNabb, and our Chief Environmental Compliance Officer, Miss Maria Hauser, who I think may be like on an island somewhere. So I'm glad that she can call in because she had already left for the day. But we hope that she's in a safe place to and appreciate her joining us here today. So without further ado, hey Maria, thanks for being here. Director Hayes, I'll kick it over to you, and if you want to share your screen and go through the presentation, you have the floor. Thank you, sir. And I'll ask you to unmute yourself as well. All right, Director Hayes, go and unmute yourself if you don't mind. There you go. Oh, and we still can't hear you.
So,
I hear Maria.
well, I can go ahead and get started with it.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Maria. Thank you.
On the second slide, it really summarizes what we have done thus far. And in this discussion on the webinar, we are going to talk about the path forward. So when we get to the second slide, I don't know if David could forward the slide, you would see that together we, from what Commissioner Terry has already mentioned, we have had decades of disinvestment in both the drinking water and wastewater system. And what that simply meant was everything was out of sight and out of mind, not a lot of capital improvements, not a lot of maintenance happening on the wastewater and water systems. To address that, in 2017, we really started working towards moving the capital program forward. We created the hydraulic model for both the water and wastewater systems. We had the capital program manager come on board, the PWI, Public Works Committee, as Commissioner Terry referenced, he is a part of that. They have been working actively with the CEO's office to ensure that we have contracts that are going through. So in summary, in that executive summary, you could see where we have already invested a lot of money to fix the system. However, once the pandemic occurred, you had an offshoot in inflation, and everyone on this call has felt it, whether it's in your grocery bills, if you've had to purchase a vehicle, if you've looked at home prices, everything has had that inflationary impact post-COVID. And the water system, we are facing it as well in both the capital and the operational aspect. Because of that, even though the governing authority took action in 2022 and adopted an initial 6% rate increase. So this was the first time DeKalb residents had ever had a rate increase in the past decade since 2014. There was only one. Even with that rate increase, because of the increased pressures post-COVID, we are now in a state where we actually need additional funding to continue the work that has already started in the capital improvement program. And this presentation kind of goes into some of the needs that are still existing. It takes us through a history of that disinvestment, and then it projects a path forward that we have going on. So,
Maria, do you mind? I'd like to give some preference to what has happened for the people that are here. Um, for those who don't know, Watershed, DeKalb County, we have just over 6,000 linear miles of pipe in the ground. We have just at 70 lift stations and pump stations throughout DeKalb County to help move water to your places of housing and residence and businesses, and then lift stations to take that water collection system pipe to take that to the wastewater treatment facilities. We have just at 13 um, pump stations, booster stations out there to help boost pressures up. We have about 10 pressure zone stations to monitor pressures throughout the system. And then we have just at 15 water tanks and towers around the county. And all of this stuff, it's in place and has been in place for a number of years and has aged a bit. Watershed, we have been maintaining this equipment in these locations, but what has happened over time, it's gotten old. And with that, we have put in place plans to repair, upgrade, replace this stuff. And we have been working on those plans for a while now. And I just wanted to give you a preference on where we are and where we stand.
Maria?
thanks, David. So as we get into the presentation, we're going to talk about three main sections. And we'll scroll forward. So I think everybody's seeing the slides. I saw in the Q&A, someone said they weren't seeing the slides. So I think everybody has that opportunity. So, of course, we have had successes in the capital improvement program, but there are needs and there is a path forward. So, successes thus far, and I know we continue on the slides, and these slides are available online under the Department of Watershed Management Capital Improvement Program. All right. So, successes, we have collectively already invested $1.25 billion since 2017 in the drinking water and wastewater system. And you see the breakdown on the slide there, where a greater amount has gone into the wastewater system. As Commissioner Terry alluded to earlier on in the webinar, we are under a federally mandated consent decree, and that really drives some of the actions we have to take in particular timeframes. Hence, a bit more focus initially on the wastewater system. If we go ahead on, you will see how investment has ramped up from initially 50 million per year to where it really needs to be sustained between 100 and 200 million dollars per year. Industry expectations are that you rehabilitate about 1% of your system. And as Director Hayes gave that number of that 6,000 linear feet, it's actually from here to San Francisco. Those are the pipes that we are maintaining. And to replace all of those pipes, it takes a lot of dollars. Thus far, we've been able to diversify the amount of revenues to assist in that $1.25 billion investment. So it's not just only rates we have relied on to do that capital improvement. We have, of course, rates is considered the operating funds, 29%. We have also borrowed money via bonds, and that's 23%. We have had low interest loans from the federal government, and that acronym is called WIFIA, from the Georgia Environmental Finance Act, which is in Georgia about 6%. We have utilized federal grants in the way of the ARP funding, as well as the Emergency Utility Assistance Fund and other sources. We've discussed optimization, and Commissioner Terry referenced that one of the amendments would be looking closely at how the Department of Watershed Management operates. And as you could see from that operational chart, and I know the slides are going, let's get to the operational one more. Right there, we have actually taken action to optimize how we operate. One, by decreasing expenses, reducing water loss. That's a key amount. If we could reduce the amount of water that's leaking out, we are saving. Utilizing the low interest loans via WIFIA and Chiefr, we are saving in the long run versus debt refunding. So for instance, we had prior debt bonds from 2011 and even before. We refinance them the same way you can do with your mortgage when you have a lower interest rates and had savings. Eliminating negative arbitrage. Previously, we had debt issued and interest was accumulating on that debt without that debt being spent. We're not doing it that way anymore. As we get dollars in, we spend them, or we are able to draw without incurring interest. So we're paying as we're utilizing. We've also focused on increasing revenues as a method of optimization. We had an audit of all of our commercial accounts, and the results of that audit has netted us over $26 million of additional funds being collected. One of the problems the department has faced and tackled was having incorrect meters. And if you recall, back in 2016, there was a moratorium launch, and we have addressed that via the New Day program. Just having the meters being changed out, being more accurate in their reading, having the automated system, we have $2 million additional where we've collected. Lifting the service disconnection moratorium, where we actually began saying that we would start the disconnection process for non-payment, a lot of people simply paid their bill to the tune of $23.8 million. So we were able to collect from that. Similarly, the Federal American Rescue Grant, we've utilized 20 million from that, as well as the Emergency Utility Assistance. So there has been optimization already. We are focused on increasing revenues, reducing costs before we come back to the ratepayers to ask to continue to support us. Director Hayes, I'm not sure if you wanted to add in. Okay, well, I'll go forward on the next slide. As I mentioned before, there has been a significant impact based on the post-COVID. Similar to your budgets, we have salaries that have increased in prices. We've also seen personnel costs going up and operationals. And I would like Director Hayes, if possible, I believe you were having problems with the volume, but if you could kind of share what has happened on the operational side that is driving costs up. And I don't think we're getting Director Hayes, so. Okay, I'll go ahead and I'll continue on then. One of the things on the operational side and the difference between Director Hayes and myself, he focuses on operations. I focus on the capital improvement, which is the renewal of the system. On the operational side, we have seen an extensive amount of cost increase due to chemicals, as well as all of the components and the parts that are utilized in the system. So we're talking about 150% increase in chemical costs since 2014, as well as a 51% increase since 2019 on all the fittings, the parts that we put together, not just at the plant, but also the lift station, all of the components Director Hayes mentioned.
Maria?
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it's the point in David's computer's having difficulty right now, but I think just looking at watershed department like any other business, the employee cost, whether it's benefits for employees, salary for employees, all of those things have been a major driver, as well as fuel for vehicles, each of those components. And of course, there's the raw materials that go into putting pipe in the ground. So you're spot on when you talk about the inflationary pressures that we're faced in our Department of Watershed Management. It's like any other major business.
Absolutely, Zach. As we go on, so you have the operational pressures of price increasing, but on the capital side, which is the next slide over, we also have an increase in construction costs. And what's significant is ductile iron, which is the material of choice for all of water pipes as well as sewer pipes. That has increased by 80% since the pandemic period. So a lot of our estimates that we had years ago are no longer valid because the simple cost of material, the pipe that we put into the ground, has gone up by 80%. Next slide.
I think we're having some difficulties.
So I'll go ahead and I'll keep on talking. So part of that, we've already addressed the successes and we're getting into some of the challenges. And what I would like to focus on is our water system. In DeKalb County, so these are some additional price inflation. We go on to the next slide. As well, if we could get it. Okay. We've discussed that. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay. This chart actually shows what has happened to prices on the construction side in the Atlanta area. You see how the red line has spiked. And we'll continue on. All right, let's talk about our water system. Our water system really starts at the Chattahoochee River. DeKalb County, we have one source of drinking water. We pull water out of the Chattahoochee River into our reservoirs, and we take that water to our sole and only water treatment plant. So DeKalb only has one water treatment plant. That plant treats the water and then sends it out via transmission mains, which are the superhighways of our water system, and then into our community. So let's take a look on the next slide over our water treatment plant and the history of our water treatment plant. The Scott Candler Water Treatment Plant was initialized in 1942. Portions of that plant was renewed in 2007. However, there are still remnants from that 1942 era, and we really have a need to address those deteriorating parts. On the next couple of slides, you're actually going to see pictures of what we've encountered. We've previously shared with the board last year and even this year, we have temporarily lost service or the ability to produce water at the plant. However, we do have tanks at the plant to continue pushing out clean drinking water to the public, but that is limited. And hence the reason for the need to address the 1942 era assets we have at the plant. It's because the plant is temporarily or has temporarily shut down on numerous occasions. Next slide, if possible. Okay, on the left-hand side, you will see a building that is the electrical building at the water treatment plant. Those poles that you see there that in blue, both on the front and on the side, are there to hold the building up. This building contains all the electrical controls, etc., to help us operate the plant, but the building is falling down literally. And that needs to be addressed. On the top right-hand side, you actually see a bird's eye view of the 1942 Clearwell. This is one project. The cost is about $200 million to address that 1942 era asset. It is the single tank that holds the treated water after the water has been treated before it goes to the pipes. All of that treated water is held in that facility, and we need urgently to address those issues. On the next slide, you could see another reason why we were temporarily lost the water plant last year and earlier this year. It's because of the starter cabinet. That is a burnt mark on the starter cabinet. So we have assets that are deteriorating thus far where they're actually burning up. On the left-hand side, that's a picture of our transfer pump. And what that means is to get the water into the system, down the transmission main highway to your homes and businesses, we have to utilize these transfer pumps. They're from 1989 and they urgently need to be replaced as well. Next slide. So right now, if you just look at our one and only water treatment plant, we have several projects that total almost $3 million. In addition to that, you see we also have the last bullet talks about the controls that we need to address. We have had on 6 different occasions, this year alone, we have lost the ability to control the plant, and we've had to station individuals at critical locations to let the operators know what was happening, whether a motor was going on, a valve was going on, pressures at the water treatment plant, hence the criticality of dealing with it. So let's shift gears away from the water treatment plant and let's get into the water distribution system. So after you leave the water treatment plant and we're getting into the water distribution system, which is 3,000 miles of system, If you go on to the next slide, the big superhighways have shown signs of aging. This year, we have had a failure twice at McClendon, both in February and April of this year, where we had catastrophic failure, washing away 2 yards, causing traffic backup, etc. What is critical about this is both the Buford Highway pipeline that failed in 2019 and McClendon that has already failed twice. They carry 35% of the drinking water to the system. So as you can imagine, once you start losing these large transmission mains, you lose the ability to supply several people, up to a third of the system. Next slide. There is a huge impact when you have a loss of water, whether it's small business closure. I think there were some comments there talking about what has happened in other jurisdictions, but it's really a life impact because we have, whether it's Emory, the CDC, CHOA, hospitals, dialysis centers, water is fundamental. Now that we've talked a little bit about water, once we utilize water, we end up generating wastewater. So whether we take a shower, we wash our dishes, we do our laundry, we have wastewater. And this, a part of the wastewater system is under the federally mandated consent decree. We have done, as I mentioned before, $725 million has already been invested to reduce the risk of spills. So this is where the wastewater system becomes so full of wastewater, particularly during rain events where stormwater enters the wastewater system. And you have spills where sewage gets spilled in our communities, close to our park, our homes, our schools. So to address a lot of that issues, we have a couple of projects that we are tackling on the next slide. For example, on the sewer side, you also have superhighways. They're called major trunk lines. And our major trunk lines, as you can see from those three pictures, some of them are aerial. They're in the sky and they are supported, but they leak. The picture on the left bottom shows a manhole in a waterway. It's a wetlands area, and we need to address that. The cost of a lot of the trunk line rehabilitation, you have massive costs there as well, up to $300 million just to address those trunk lines. So we continue on, moving forward, we do plan to continue our optimization efforts. And I don't know if we want to pause here and see if there are any questions. Commissioner Terry, not sure how you want to do this, or Zach.
Yes, and thank you, Maria. And we did get actually one, and I had to log out for a few minutes, so I'm going to just kind of go in reverse order here. But we did get a question that was more of a technical question that from an anonymous attendee that said, has there been an increase in the size or the width of the sewage pipes in the county? Why and how could this affect billing? Would you like to answer that?
Sure. So, and I'll let Director Hayes, if he possibly can, chime in as well. The size of the sewer pipes do not affect billing. Billing, and I'll have actually.
Can you hear me now, Maria?
Yes, we can hear her now.
Yes.
It's the sewer is really driven by your water usage. So it's really your water meter, which logs how much water you use. And if you can imagine, the amount of water you utilize turns into wastewater, and that's what you're billed on. Director Hayes or CFO McNabb, if you want to expound on that.
And yeah, and I'll go to the left of the question a bit. We are increasing the sewer pipe size as we upgrade. The pipe in the ground, most of them are as old as DeKalb itself. and DeKalb was not populated not as near as it is populated now with nearly 800,000 people. So that yields a larger pipe to meet the need or the demand from the current population of DeKalb. But also, we're not just putting pipe in the ground today for the current. We need to think forward and have the pipe sized for future DeKalb to allow DeKalb to continue to expand and grow at the rate that it is. Um, as Maria said, the the charge for sewer is from the meter. As you use water, a portion of your water bill um, helps fund that collection system and the treatment of the wastewater.
So, for instance, if your water meter shows that you have utilized 2,000 gallons for the month, it's a multiplier that says, okay, this is the charge for sewer. And you take the 2,000 gallons that you've utilized for the month and you multiply. So it's not driven by the size of your sewer lateral leaving your home or your business. It's really driven by the amount of water you utilize. Commissioner Terry, are there any additional questions?
Yes, and I think maybe a sort of a point of context here that might be interesting for folks is when we think about, as Director Hayes said, sort of the legacy pipes that were in some time place, put in 60, 70 years ago, and new development that comes online. And I know for the last year, y'all's department have been taking applications from new developers that had been put on hold because the sewer capacity wasn't there. And do you want to describe that program of how if there's new development coming in, there is an impact to the capacity, what they're basically flushing down the toilets, and later down the system, and so there's a shared cost. Is that correct when it comes to some of those pipe upsizing or pipe repairs that might be needed because of that additional capacity use?
That's true, Commissioner. What the Commissioner is speaking of to help facilitate development, we were lacking on capacity, but some developers have agreed to do a cost share with DeKalb Watershed, where when they want to build a new subdivision, and the sewer capacity is not there, the developers are willing and have been paying for half of the cost to upsize the collection system or the sewer pipes to allow the development. And it doesn't just benefit that development, but what they also do is when we upsize, they have to upsize enough to facilitate that development and to aid the communities around that development. So it benefits that development and it benefits the existing infrastructure or houses or communities around there.
Great, thank you. And let's take a couple more questions here. And so just maybe as a quick housekeeping, so I believe that folks might have to raise their hand in order to be sort of let in to kind of be elevated. So we're going to take like the actual like live question and answer after the end of the presentation, because I'm sure that there might be some information later on that might answer or may be a good place to sort of jump off on. But there were a couple quick questions that we had in the Q&A. One was from Travis Allen that asked about data centers and are they being built now or in the future in DeKalb County? And obviously there's a lot of electricity for those operations. But Director Hayes, Maria, are we aware of any data centers that have been built or have been proposed in DeKalb County?
Thus far, DeKalb County has not had any request for data centers. Our sister municipalities surrounding us have, and they are working through those challenges of trying to facilitate those requests. But no, currently DeKalb County has not had requests for data centers.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. And then also similar to this earlier part of the presentation about just the wear and tear and the decades of lack of maintenance. One question that came in was saying we've had decades of wear and tear in the system, and the caller asked, how does the system get to this point? Can you explain the routine and periodic maintenance that occurs moving forward? Will the maintenance be more consistent so large overhauls are not required in the future? And maybe between Director Hayes and Maria, that's the kind of the fundamental point is, how do we get to this point? You said it earlier, but if you could just kind of review that point again, if you don't mind.
So there has been a series, if you could imagine, we did not have a full-scale capital improvement program probably ever. This is the first time we've actually had a master plan to look forward into the future. But on an industry standard, as we've mentioned before, we have about 3,000 miles on the sewer side, 3,000 miles on the water side. And industry standard recommends if you believe your asset is going to last for 100 years, you need to replace at least 1% of your system per year. The cost of doing that, it's $100 million per year on the sewer, $100 million per year on the water. And it's probably going up as inflationary pressures exist. So going forward, we have now established a capital improvement program driven by data metrics under the hydraulic models for both the water and the wastewater side, as well as having a master plan to project the growth in DeKalb County in what areas. So we would not face this going forward. How this happened in the past, I believe it was out of sight, out of mind. Not a lot of investments. It's not as fun to address things that are typically buried. And there was just growth going on in DeKalb County without thinking about the future. So for example, DeKalb County has not built a transmission main since 1974. Okay. Yet DeKalb County has grown 8.1 times since 1974. And there has not been another large pipe to convey drinking water anywhere in DeKalb County. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Zach, if you want to. Zach. And please introduce yourself if you haven't already, Mr. COO.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Maria. One of the important points when talking about how did we get here is really if we were to reflect back as recently as about 15 years ago. And that's when the county was really in the throes of a discussion with federal agencies over establishing a consent decree. And jurisdictions, quite frankly, don't get placed under a consent decree because they're doing what they should be doing. They get placed under a consent decree, essentially sued into a consent decree because of their inability to maintain certain standards, whether it's water, sewer, whether it's a jail, it doesn't matter. But when the federal government steps in and we have to try to get things resolved with a consent decree, that shows that there have been years, if not decades, of disinvestment into the system. So the fact that around the 2010, 2011, we were negotiating for a consent decree, what that shows is that the decades prior to that, work was not being done sufficiently to address these issues. Over the past, 10, 12 years, certainly over the last 8 years, the governing authority has exercised the legislative will. The administrations have, especially over the last 8 years, have exercised the administrative skill to move forward and address these issues that had been long neglected. But the simple reality is the system was neglected, which is how we got into a consent decree to begin with. What we're doing now is trying to find our way through it and build a sustainable system that not only does not have a consent decree over time, but is optimum for a clean environment, meaningful, sustainable growth, and so forth.
Thank you, Zach.
So hopefully that addresses your question.
Yes, thank you. And I do want to acknowledge that I believe everyone here on this call was not here in DeKalb County 20 years ago.
Right.
So to the extent that we inherit...
But our job is to fix it, right?
Yes, sir. Exactly. So this is and this is part of kind of I think what we're really going to be continuing talking about this evening and then over the next several weeks into the next year is how did we get to this point and how do we avoid kicking the can further down the road to the next board of commissioners, the next CEO, the next future DeKalb residents, and it's here we are, and we're trying to make the best decision we possibly can. There was a couple questions that I'll just pause for a minute on because I think they're important. Some folks asked about just the rebates for low flow toilets or water conservation. And so I think we've acknowledged in the chat that there are these programs available. But Director Hayes, do you just want to speak about that program and folks can get rebates to get the lower flow, more water conservation toilets, I believe.
Sure, Commissioner. The DeKalb County ordinance allows for homeowners to replace up to 3 toilets in your resident, your primary residence, and DeKalb Watershed will reimburse you for the cost of those toilets. What that allows us to do is to upgrade your toilet so that it utilizes less water, which saves on your water bill, and that reduces the volume of water that goes down the collection system.
Great, thank you. Okay, all right, so let's pause on the questions there. And Maria, Director Hayes, you want to take up the next section here, the moving forward?
Sure. So we have pursued optimization efforts, as we mentioned previously, by increasing revenues, decreasing costs, and looking at other funding options as we face the rate challenge, the rate increase challenge. Let us see if we could move the slides forward.
Yeah, it's stuck.
It's stuck. Okay. But what I'm going to do, I am going to drop, hopefully I could drop it into the chat, a link to our capital improvement program, both the 2021 capital improvement program, and on that page on the left-hand side, we also have the CIP 2024 and all of the presentations that have been done thus far. For the board, it's all posted there in an effort to be transparent and to really engage and get feedback from the community. We plan to continue the optimization efforts. As you can see on the screen, we are focusing on reducing water loss. Right now, the county faces about 3 breaks, water line breaks per day because of the aging system that we're responding to. We are looking at our big transmission lines, ensuring that we're finding leaks on them quickly and reducing the risk of those lines rupturing. We plan to continue maximizing that low interest debt from the feds via WIFIA, as well as the Georgia portion on the GFA, GEFA, and continue debt refunding. We are continuing to improve collections, and CFO McNabb, that is kind of her area. We have applied for several $1 million worth of grant type funding through the FEMA BRIC grant, the Georgia DNR, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers, and our congressmen's their offices to see if we could get federal grants from there. We do have $25 million possibly allocated from SPLOST for use in the water and sewer system. And as we continue to collect from the commercial audit, we expect to receive an additional $52.8 million from those efforts. The meter changeout program, we are estimating we will yield $5.5 million in the future. So we are trying to get revenue from all sources possible, ensure that we are reducing costs before we reach back out to the community, to the ratepayers. So we are projecting over several years that we anticipate to have about $346 million worth of savings due to the optimization efforts. Next, please. So moving forward, we are also looking at other unique ways to save money. If we get a Water First designation, we are almost complete with that application. We would save on loans from the Georgia Environmental Financing Authority of 1% on our interest that we would have to pay, and that is a saving. We are planning to apply for additional GFA funding in 2025, as well as a third WIFIA loan from the federal government in 2026. I already mentioned that we're going to continue our water loss efforts and our grant funding efforts. So these are a couple of things that we are planning to do moving forward to reduce the burden of rates on our ratepayers and on our consumers. Going forward, okay. And finally, we wanted to really highlight, this is our last slide for today. We really wanted to highlight the importance of the water treatment plant. This is where everything starts. And we only have one water treatment plant. Right now, we have funding available only for 2025 for certain water treatment plant projects. We don't have funding available for other projects in 2025 and for the water treatment plant going beyond 2025. Hence, the need for additional funding sources, whether it be via rate increases or whether it be through other opportunities that we're looking forward to. So that kind of concludes what we were thinking about sharing during this webinar. And I don't know if you wanted to pause and see if there were any questions, or if Director Hayes, if you wanted to add some more. That was it, Director Hayes.
No, Maria, I'd like to hand it back over to the Commissioner Terry and see what he'd like to do, if there are other questions or anything that need to be addressed.
Great. Thank you, Director Hayes. And yes, and so we're going to take some folks just directly from the participant. So if you all look under the reactions button at the bottom of your screen there should be a little raise hand function. And so we're going to give it a try. I have not done this in a while, so I'm going to call on Leslie Klimper. I'm going to hit the allow to talk button, and hopefully this will work. So hang on one second, Leslie. Okay, Leslie, you should be there if you unmute yourself. Go right ahead with your question or comment.
I wrote this question before I saw the final slides here. But my question was really, can a significant portion of the costs of upgrading the system be funded with not loans, but grants, infrastructure grants from federal or state authorities? And to the extent bonds have to be issued, can they be general obligation bonds, which are tied to the county's full faith and credit? And with the idea being it's not going to be translated to the same magnitude in increase in water and sewer rates.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. Director Hayes, you want to?
Commissioner Terry, would you like us to take that?
I think CFO McNabb.
Yeah, so yeah, we have a couple of echoes.
I apologize, but then this is again
Zach Williams. This is COO Zach Williams, and Dianne McNabb, our CFO,
is here and will help respond. But
to the gentleman's question, it is definitely a valid one. And over time, much like what the city of Atlanta discovered, that the rate payers can only pay for so much. I don't know that, I mean, our rates are not as high as Atlanta's. We still have a lot of room to go, but ultimately over time, whether it is creative funding through grants and such from the federal government, potentially through the state government. We've already explored and been successful getting low interest loans. But I would imagine, because this is an ongoing thing, this is not going to end in 3 years, it's not going to end in 10 years. This is a very significant system that the entire county is dependent on. So there will have to be conversations in the future on additional funding sources beyond rates. I don't know that we're there yet, but that's something that we will always have to explore to see, can we get more cost sharing by, maybe it is some sort of a tax, much like what they have done with the most in Atlanta. When you mentioned general fund, that would be kind of a millage assessment. All of those things have to be on the table over time.
Great. Thank you, Zach. Leslie, did that answer your question? Did you have any follow-up?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm gonna put you back in the queue there. So thanks for joining us. All right. I see Mr. Stephen Benny is here also, and Mr. Benny had several questions. So Stephen, I'll let you take the floor and feel free to ask one or two questions.
Okay, I won't take too much time, Ted, Zach. I appreciate having the opportunity. When you showed the Atlanta slide and you showed that their water rate was so much more than ours, you included their most sales tax in there. So the difference is not that significant. And I believe, and also I think that most sales tax may be applicable to DeKalb County. We could do away with the e-host tax and lower the millage rates, and then have that extra penny to use towards our water system, which is in such dire need of repair. Everyone agrees on that. And that would give you some extra money. Other than that, I'm just a little concerned that you all are planning to take $1 million away to use for commissioners' personal pet projects instead of leaving it for the water bill. I think even though you're bringing $1 million from the general funds over there, I think you may find that you're going to need more than $1 million. Thank you very much for your time.
Great.
Mr. Benny, let me assure you that our financial contracts with the bondholders do not allow us to move any money from watershed into any other part of the government. All the monies that we collect in rates have to be plowed right back into the water system itself.
Yes, and Jack, do you want to clarify about the Atlanta water rate and then how the most
Mr. Benny, and thank you for your comments and your ongoing engagements. We really appreciate it. But the numbers that we presented as it relates to the rates are simply the rates. So in addition to the rates that are being charged by Atlanta and being comparative to ours, Atlanta has an additional municipal option sales tax. So those costs are in addition to it, and quite frankly, that's what it takes.
Well, why couldn't we use the same system, same tax? Is there a reason that we can't use a most tax?
Well, and those are the things that have to be on the table over time. They have to be over time. Yes.
Yeah, and I believe Steve.
And that requires action from our legislature.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we would need to go to the legislature. As many of y'all know, we are up to, I think it's 8 cents now. So we're almost near the top and of what state law allows us to impose as a sales tax. But I think, Mr. Benny, you're exactly right. A most is something that could be considered. It would have to be a state legislation and a ballot referendum, of course. So certainly something to consider. And then just to address the other question that you had about the customer assistance program. So one of the things that we had discussed at the PWI committee last week was that this one-time $1 million ARP interest funding was one time. And what we were really interested in is a policy that sets in motion a permanent funding source from the watershed enterprise fund to fund the customer assistance discount program. And the rationale there is that the Water Enterprise Fund exists, whereas this one-time allocation of ARP money is one and done, and then it's gone. And so from a longevity perspective, the idea was bake that into as a policy so that the assistance program would always have funding available through that particular fund. I will say, though, that when it comes to ARP allocations and what my office is considering, all of our ARP allocations, one, had to meet the ARP criteria, and two, they were basically all centered around assistance with housing, assistance with utilities, assistance with rent, with customer billing, with customer repairs, plumbing repairs. So the good thing is that ARP money, as well as the ARP interest funds, can be used directly to support those who are still being impacted by COVID. And we have until 2026 to spend those funds. And the good news is that as of, Zach, as of today, we've allocated the final bits of ARP money, which is good. That means it's it's set, and the government can't pull it back next year from us, and we have 2 years to spend it. So there's still more time and more runway to fully utilize those dollars, but it is a one-time source, and we don't, looking at how DC and Washington is shaping up this next couple of years, we really don't expect more government assistance programs to come down, like, for instance, the LIWAP program, which was something that had been in place during COVID that helped pay water bills in particular. It's similar to the LIHEAP program, which helps with heating assistance on your utility bills. So that's a key thing there that was helping a lot of folks in the water and other utility sectors, but those funds have been exhausted. Mr. Benny, did that answer your question? Any follow-up or any additional comments?
It doesn't really answer my questions, but I understand what you're saying, and I thank you for your time and your consideration.
Great. Thank you, sir. All right, I'll put you back into the queue there. All right, and then see here, next we got Miss Pamela Wilcox. I'll click on her. Go right ahead, Miss Wilcox. Yes, you should be unmuted now, Miss Wilcox. You're speaking. We can't hear you, Pamela. All right, I'm gonna leave you unmuted, and if you can get your audio working, just type up. Let me turn to Brenda Pace. Hey, Brenda, I'm gonna click on your button there. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Miss Pace, and go ahead with your question or comment.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there you are, Miss Wilcox. Right. Pause one second, Miss Pace.
Let her go, and then I'll come in.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Yes. Go ahead, Miss Wilcox.
Just a quick, simple question. I just want to know what the rate increase is going to be starting 2025. If I have an average bill of $20 every month, what can I expect my bill to be going forward?
So great question, Ms. Wilcox. And we got a lot of questions like that ahead of time in the chat. And so just to be completely transparent with everyone who maybe doesn't follow the day-to-day and the minute-by-minute Board of Commission meetings, the action that was taken today at the Board of Commissioner meeting was to defer the agenda item that the administration has put forward, which is the 6% increase over 3 years. That has been deferred to the last meeting in January for additional discussion and consideration. And the sort of the beginning date of that potential rate increase on that particular agenda item is at least 4 months later. So anything that would be voted on based on just the IT department and the billing department getting everything set and testing all of the rate structures, it would take a minimum of 4 months to go into effect. So any decision we would make would then start that 4-month clock. So as of now, nothing will impact your bill January 2025, February, March, and then into April as of now.
And my expectation will be a 6% increase, although it's been deferred until the end of January. Usually those type things just end up going back to the original request of the 6%. Normally doesn't end up being less.
Yes, ma'am. We're trying to look at all the options, and we want to give our new commissioners and CEO a chance to weigh in. But CFO McNabb, do you want just to answer the general question of the 6% over 3 years, what that might mean for the average water bill?
Well, for Ms. Wilcox, with a $20 water bill,
$1.20.
it would be $21.20 with 6% rate increase. If you'll bear with me for a second.
240.
And I just threw that $20 out for simplicity.
Yeah, it's
And I tell you what, if y'all have
$21.20,
say it again, Diane.
then $22.47, and $23.83 after 3 years.
Okay.
Okay.
And just for the staff here, if y'all find that one of those other slides that kind of showed sort of, how those average bills look, if you can find it and throw it up on the screen there, I think that would be good just to kind of visualize it. And then just another question that kind of related to what Ms. Wilcox was getting at. So CFO McNabb, in terms of the percent every year, does it compound? Is that sort of the idea? It's 6%, and then the next year 6%
Yes,
the previous.
it does compound.
Okay, and can you just maybe explain what functionally that means? It's not it's a math problem.
The 6% increase on a $20 bill, we apply, basically you take $20 and you multiply it by 1.06. That's what gives you $21.20. Then you take $21.20 and add 6% to it, or multiply it by 1.06. And so each year there's that 6% increase is applied to your current year's total.
Great. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Ms. Wilcox, did that answer your question? Do you have any follow-up comments or questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'll put you back in the queue there. And Miss Brenda Pace, go ahead and unmute yourself. Brenda, if you're there, unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. I have a question that I think all concerned citizens should ask first and should ask that takes place. And that is, before any other funding of any kind is brought into this system regarding this conversation, this plan, this assignment, I think we need to have a forensic audit first. This has been going on for many, many years, more than 10 years also, that there's been all kinds of problems here with, monies for this and monies for that when it comes to the sewer, the pump house and all of that. So I think what we need to look at, and the citizens need to ask, and I will be one of the people to start waking people up to this and asking them to ask for it and demand it, since they are the employers of this of the county. I think we need to have a forensic audit first, a forensic audit when monies come in, and one periodically throughout the process as we move forward with each level of this fix, as I call it. There's been too much money coming into DeKalb County that's been unaccounted for. Our citizens don't even know what's going on anymore in the county because our commission meetings are in the mornings and not in the evenings, which was done purposely so that they can do what they want to and not hear any pullback from the commissioners. So we're also wanting to, eventually going to demand, well, we're not going to eventually, we're putting together a group throughout DeKalb County now to demand that our commission meetings start back in the evenings. So I think we need to look at, and citizens need to ask, that we have forensic audits actually throughout all the departments right now with the new regime coming in. But, and I see you smiling, Ted, you knew I wasn't going to be easy on this one. So You know, your smile is warranted. Okay. I will not be easy on this one when it comes to money anymore in DeKalb County. And I think the citizens in DeKalb County need to stop sitting back and allowing a lot of this to happen. And that's what I have to say. So we need to start out with a forensic audit in the beginning, and then throughout the process until funding quit coming in, and it's not, and the public, taxpayers, voters are well aware of where money's going, where we are with this, where we are with that. So I thank you for holding this meeting. I think that was a very wise move on your part. Thank you so very much, Ted, and thank everyone who's here tonight. Mr. Williams, Ms. Dr. Hayes, I appreciate your input, and it was very, very good. Thank you, and that's all I have to say. And I think the citizens that are listening should also think about this also. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pace. And certainly we will take that into consideration. As I've said earlier, the agenda item was deferred, so there is time for further amendments to be made. I'll just say, sort of for my part, you know, I have been on the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee for the last 4 years. One of the things that is, I think, a feature of that committee, you know, being made up of your commissioners that represent you, is that regularly the contracts that are voted on and approved by the committee are sent to the Office of Independent Internal Audit to really just kind of ground truth and sort of make sure, is this exactly what we need in that contract? And we sort of style it as savings, but think about it more of just making sure that the contract is on point. It's not necessarily that we're saving money, but we're not necessarily, you know, spending or allocating X number of dollars if the independent auditor says, well, actually, you need a little bit less. And it's one of the things that CEO-elect Lorraine Cochran-Johnson talked a lot about during her time as chair, about realizing almost $40 million in, you know, quote unquote savings by just reducing contracts as they come to us. And of course, Director Hayes, you know, yeah, he always, you know, weighs in, and sometimes, and I think most of the time, Director Hayes, you agree with the auditor. So I think that process is something we want to continue, because it really looks at each individual contract, which is the actual operational, like, we got the money in the budget, but now we actually have to spend it with a vendor, with a contractor to do the work. Also, I will mention that every year the county is required to go through a full audit. It's not a forensic audit, but it is an audit that Malden and Jenkins, are you know, government approved auditing firm, submits every year to the Finance Audit and Budget Committee, and is accepted by the commissioners. And so I think that these are things that we can, you know, discuss and work on. If the concern is where the money's going, you know, maybe we can be even more transparent about where that money's going. You know, I would say, that as a committee member, I know where it's going because I got to vote on it, you know, the last 4 years.
The trick word,
but you gotta sit through the committee meetings to get to each of those agenda items. And one thing I will say, Ms. Pace, I appreciate you advocating for a nighttime meeting. Keep in mind, though, that today we started at 9 a.m. and we ended at 5:15 today. So if we
this is nothing new, no excuse. You wanted the job, you got voted for it. Now it's up to you. So it's up to you to make sure that these citizens and taxpayers are kept on top of things, and this under the pillow stuff ends. This is why there's been so much corruption in DeKalb County. And no, don't say it wasn't, because it definitely was.
Okay. All right. Well, I was elected 4 years ago.
Those audits are all available online.
Yes, thank you.
We all need to know where the money is going. We need to have these kinds of things more often with any monies that's going out of this county and coming in this county. What the plan is, not just they're going to sit there and go through it themselves and vote on it. That needs to end. And we're putting together a dog watch group from all over the county. We're bringing people in from all over the county to sit on it. So, honey, it's not going to be an easy job anymore. Trust me on that note. I don't trust it. And no, neither does anybody else. This is why this whole voting and everything is turned around the way it has here.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Ms. Pace. I appreciate those comments.
Thank you again. Goodbye. I'm not going to say anything else. You and I are going to have our private conversation anyway. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Pace. All right. Let's go to I see Mr. Tommy Travis. Hey, Tommy, you're live. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey, Commissioner Terry, thank you for hosting this event. Director Hayes and COO Williams, I appreciate you guys answering these questions and having this robust conversation. And for the record, I'm going to say my name is Tommy T. Travis, an advocate for the community. What I wanted to bring up was just to bring back to mention before I ask my question. Years ago, we had a great mayor in Atlanta, Shirley Franklin, who underwent most of her term. She readjusted her personal goals and started and undertook the infrastructure. And she did a wonderful job in turning around, doing the dirty work and doing all the infrastructure. Well, most of the infrastructure needed to be done. And when her term was over with, it still was some left to be done. As we know, the world knows now, it wasn't finished. So that begs the question to me, if whatever plan that we come up with as a county, what protections will be baked in to make sure though this job is finished so that no future commissioners or no future administration can redirect the money toward pet projects, and we want to make sure the job is finished.
Great. Zach, you want to take that one?
To Commissioner Terry, and I'll start. Mr. Travis, always good to hear from you. The way I would look at this is it's not necessarily a start finish. Over time, the better we do and the more we repair our system, the less we will have to spend in terms of a percentage of revenues from the utility. But it's just like maintaining your house, your car, or our personal maintenance of ourselves, right? It doesn't necessarily end. Mayor Franklin did an admirable job, and as a matter of fact, they had, jokingly termed her as the sewer mayor, or the mayor for the sewer, something like that.
Yeah.
And she did a wonderful job. But if you think about it, DeKalb County, like Atlanta, I mean, we're 200 years old. There are pipes in the ground right now that are 90 to 100 years old. And so it takes time to replace those. And as we replace those over the next 20 years or so, they're the ones that are 60 and 70 years old are going to be, it's going to be a continuous thing. So I think having conversations like this and insisting, quite frankly, that the government is often talking with the public, explaining here's where we are and here's where we're going, and keeping this dialogue at the forefront will ensure that not only we do a better job than our predecessors did, quite frankly, at maintaining the system. We will ensure that we're meeting the needs for development, for environmental stewardship, and being cost effective all in the process. And that just goes with open dialogue, us being honest and upfront as to where we are now and where we're going. And no one on this call is going to say it's going to be easy or inexpensive. But what we will say is we're going to optimize every dollar that we spend, and you can hold us to it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So are we going to bake in some processes that can't be overturned, sort of like in our the way we do things, to make sure that the infrastructure matches the development, so to speak? Because I see that as a problem if we try to continue to develop without the infrastructure being in place.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's a great point, Tommy. Let me see if I can take a stab at sort of what we're, like there's sort of two different lanes here. Maria touched on it earlier. If our water and sewer system was top-notch shape, everything was great, no repairs, no consent decree, we just needed to maintain it, there would be a cost of service, there would be a regular maintenance, 1% to 2% every year, which is hundreds of millions of dollars. So there's sort of that has to be done because, we have pipes that just need to be maintained. And then we have the consent decree. We have the areas that have not been touched in decades. And so to a certain extent, that CIP that Maria dropped in the chat earlier, that is the plan. And the plan is a plan. So plans change and things change, but you got to have a starting point. And Maria, Zach, Dianne, the cost of the CIP that's all the repairs. Is that including maintenance as well? Speak a little bit about how you have a plan, but then you still need to do the contracts. You need to do the vending. You need to do, the work and project management to accomplish the plan. I'll let Director Hayes take that if you want.
Yeah, or Director Hauser.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Terry. So part of what, as you mentioned, I presented a link in the chat, and that directly takes us not just to the CIP from 2021, it takes us to the master plan. And the master plan looks forward to 2050 as far as the assets that need to be repaired. And it goes up to 2070, projecting utilizing the Atlanta Regional Commission, the ARC, their numbers as to the growth that's projected to occur in DeKalb County, not just on the residential side, but what businesses and commercial entities are anticipated to be in DeKalb County. So we plan the capital improvement program around those two milestones: what assets need to be fixed up to 2050, and then what growth is expected up to 2070. At the same time, on the sewer side, we have a federally mandated consent decree where we have to check in with the courts regarding how we operate and maintain our system. And that has a series of 12 documents, and that's actually listed on our website as well as to how the Department of Watershed Management should maintain the sewer collection system and transmission system. It provides parameters as to how we should clean the pipes, how replacement should take place, how even the mapping of the system utilizing GIS, how even the warehouse and training of employees should occur. And that's federally mandated as well for the next couple of years. So to answer the question, we do have written plans, both on the operational side, as well as what Commissioner Terry, you mentioned, the renewing of the system where we have to keep up, replace at least 1% of the water and sewer system each year. And I hope that answers the question. And everyone, you could see the link. If you click on that, there are several documents there regarding our plans that the board has approved.
Thank you, Maria. And so, Tommy, just to put a finer point on it, I think, when it comes to the consent decree, these are specific areas that must be fixed. And so those are kind of non-negotiable. I mean, we really want to fix those because the EPA has said these are priority areas. But look, let's be honest, I can't tell you what the next Board of Commissioners are going to do next year because we ain't here yet, right? So it's possible things can change. I think the general idea, and this is something that I think has been discussed in the Q&A about, well, what is the actual rate increase? Is it 3 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 6%? Is it 8%? And for my part, I will just say what I generally would like to see is a longer term plan. And there's a lot of advantages to setting in motion a longer term plan because it allows us, one, to plan ahead. It allows us to have greater certainty in what the rates will be each year, but also to know that the funding will be there to accomplish the work. And the biggest thing that I have noticed and sort of the decade of things that did not happen is that because we waited a year, 5 years, 10 years to do some of these areas that need to be fixed, it actually ends up costing a lot more money. In the meantime, there was a lot of money spent on repairs. And so this is the kind of the duality of this. Things are breaking all the time. Maria pointed out almost 3 breaks a day. And if we don't do anything next year, don't put any new money into the system, we're getting up to 5 or 6 breaks a day and then 10 breaks a day. So there's an opportunity cost here where the longer we wait, the more expensive it is, not only just to keep repairing and, plugging the holes, so to speak, and then actually fixing the really old pipe with the new type of pipe that will last much longer, and then be in the maintenance program because you still got to maintain it, right?
And I agree with you, Ted. I think that
Yep.
the maintenance of it all, I think we're on point. I agree with the fact that they need to be repaired. I guess my biggest concern is to make sure that if finish is not the appropriate word, to make sure that the maintenance, some of the protections are baked in so that the maintenance will continue. Because without infrastructure, there can not be no positive growth. But I'll leave it at that. I don't want to dominate your call, but thank you, Ted.
Yeah, thank you. And one thing I will say is, and we were talking with CFO McNabb earlier today about this. When we talk about the consent decree and the areas that really need to be fixed, imagine a world and a future for DeKalb where those priority areas are fixed. Imagine where the trunk lines and the sewer lines are up to standards. And now we're just talking about maintenance. Now we're just talking about the regular maintenance. Well, the good news is maintaining is a lot cheaper than doing the big repairs. So it's very possible that in 10 years, we get to a point where we've made tremendous progress on these repairs, and we could be in a position to actually lower rates. And that really should be the goal, right? We don't need this money to keep building up if we're not going to use it. And so we want to get to a point where actually, you know what? We don't need those revenues. We can begin to lower rates because now we're just in that maintenance phase. And just to clarify, I mentioned it earlier, but some folks on the Q&A in the chat were asking, well, what is the actual proposal? And this is just sort of I'm just going to give you all a parliamentary answer because right now, what the PWI committee, the Public Works Infrastructure Committee, had recommended as amendments, an agenda item was crafted and presented this morning, but the Board of Commissioners, all 7 of us, decided, well, let's just continue this discussion. We're not going to make any amendments. We're not going to make any major changes to the original proposal, which was the 3-year 6%. So right now, everything's on the table. And so 6%, 7.5%, 8%, 3 years versus 10 years. All of this is still up for discussion. And this is why we're having this conversation tonight, because we want to, make sure that we're clarifying the need, clarifying the how, and then at the end of the day, the final analysis is how much is it going to cost us. I will say, just for my part, I'm a big believer in consistency. One could argue that if 10 years ago the county said, you know what, we're just going to do an annual 1% increase just because we know things got to be done, we got to maintain things. It's very possible that 1% would help us do a lot of the work that's we need to do now, and we might have been talking about lower percentage increases at this point in stage of DeKalb County's 200-year history. So keep that in mind. And the potential forecast was sort of was fluctuating. 3 years at 6%, but then potentially another 2 years of 10% increases. So when we think about sort of the ups and downs of rates and how folks manage their budgets, me personally, I think it's better to have certainty than shocks into the system. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. But again, we're going to continue this discussion. No recommendation has been made, but we're having this town hall tonight because we want to get this feedback and take this into consideration. Tommy, did that answer your question? Anything else you wanted to say?
You did. Yeah, you did. I mean, I guess it's not really an answer, but I appreciate the feedback and maybe it'll start the thought process to something in that line, in that down that line.
Great. All right. Thank you, sir. All right, I'm gonna send you back to the queue there. All right, we got Miss Amy Taylor next. Go ahead, Amy. Unmute yourself.
Hello. Thank you everyone for having this town hall. We all really appreciate it. I have a couple of questions, concerns. First of all, and I mentioned this in the Q&A box, but my community is still on septic tanks. What is there a plan to get communities like mine on the sewer system, or are we still just gonna have septic tank? Is that in the plans? And also, what can we expect for the rate hikes because we don't have sewer? Are we gonna be expected to pay into that pot of money for a service that we're not getting? Additionally, our biggest problem is stormwater. It's ridiculous. When we get a heavy rain, the flooding is terrible and the water just rushes everywhere and it's awful. So, what are the plans for that? Is the stormwater even part of this discussion? Because I feel like that's one of our bigger problems. So
Yes,
take it away.
And, let me take a stab at that, but I'm going to turn it over to Director Hayes in a minute to kind of get more technical. So let me do the last question first. So stormwater, that is a whole separate issue, but it is related. And this is something that I have learned as a commissioner because I, go to all the meetings and I've gotten lots of presentations from Ms. Hauser. And there is a term of art called stormwater intrusion. And this basically means that the sewer pipes in DeKalb County and a lot of the sewer pipes that are on private property are also really old. Because they're really old, they've either began to crack, fail, roots have gotten into them, and they haven't been repaired. And so we actually estimate, and check my facts, Director Hayes, if I get this right. I'm trying to remember what y'all presented on a couple months back, but it's approximately 50% of the volume of liquid, of fluid that is coming down to the sewer pipes into the sewers treatment plants is actually not sewage. It's just rainwater soaking into the ground, soaking into folks' lateral pipes at their homes, at apartment complexes, at businesses all over the county. And that additional volume simply means more coming down the pipes. And so when it really rains, that's when the sewer overflows tend to happen because there's so much stormwater getting into the sewer pipes. And they're supposed to be separate systems, right? The stormwater goes to stormwater ponds and into the rivers and the creeks. The sewage got to stay in the pipes and go to Snapfinger or Polebridge. And so this is like another kind of issue that we have to work on. We have to work on supporting private property owners to repair their sewer pipes because we're all paying for it. And this is just another layer of the complexity of an aging water and sewer system. There's the public infrastructure, but surprise, surprise, the private infrastructure is just as bad, just as neglected, and it may actually even be worse because most private property owners don't touch it until they get a backup, in their basement, or the county comes out and says, this thing is completely collapsed and you got to fix it, right? So Director Hayes, do you want to speak a little bit about the septic, and then if there's anything I missed on the stormwater intrusion and how that impacts your operations and how much it costs, please mention that too.
Sure, Commissioner. I'd be happy to. We do have a program to where DeKalb County assists ratepayers with connecting to sewer. Not every home, not every area has sewer available, though. We do prefer almost all septic tanks to convert to sewer, but there are some instances, some situations out there that sewer will never be available because of Stone Mountain and things of that nature. Now, if your community does want to connect to sewer and there is the possibility the sewer is in the area and we can allow it to get there, we do have a septic to sewer program. And what that program does is it allows the homeowners to come together in that area and 50 plus 1% of the homeowners in that area have to agree to a special tax district. And what that yields is DeKalb County will assess a $7,500 tax that will be divided amongst 10 years. So that's $750 per year for the homeowner's part of that sewer pipe to be brung to that community. And DeKalb County picks up the remainder balance, whatever that may be. So what that says, if it's $10 million to get it there, the homeowners are only responsible for $7,500, and DeKalb County picks up the remainder balance. But again, that's only if the sewer is able to be pulled to your area.
Great. Thank you, Director Hayes. And so again, to clarify too, that process is petition driven. And so neighbors would have to get together. Amy, if your neighborhood wanted sewer connection, you'd have to all sign a petition because it would be a tax district. And that's something that in DeKalb, we don't do additional tax districts in that way unless there's a petition from over a supermajority of the neighbors. But then the other part of your question was about the bills. And so Director Hayes, correct me if I'm wrong, if you have septic, they only pay a water bill. Is that correct?
They only pay water
Right.
bill. And because you only pay water bill, that's the only portion of the bill that can increase for you. So you will only be increased on your water bill will increase by whatever rate that is voted on. There will be no sewer assessment to your bill.
Sure.
Great. Amy, did that answer your question?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I live, for those that don't know, I live on Key Road, and we just had a huge development go in there. So I'm sure there is sewer attachment somewhere. Somewhere close by.
Treatment plant near you, actually.
Yeah,
The
right.
Atlanta
Yeah,
RM
there
Clayton,
is.
I think it was. So, okay, great. All right, thank you for your question, Amy. I'll put you back in the queue. And then Director Hayes, if you don't mind, just because we did get several emails about this and some folks in the chat were asking about it. About a month and a half ago, the Watershed Department sent out a letter per the EPA regulations to water customers about the potential for lead pipes on their property. And in that letter, the Watershed Department stated that all of the public pipes in DeKalb County that transmit water are not lead. However, we do not have information about private property pipes because, of course, we didn't install them as the government. So could you just speak a little bit about what that means for the average person? Some folks got the letter and they thought it meant that they had lead pipes and they were concerned how they're going to pay for it. Just explain why that letter was important, and then what are the options or what are your recommendations for customers if they think they might have one of those homes that was built in that, like, I think it was like 1960s time period where lead pipes kind of were sort of the thing to do back then. And then maybe just a little bit about the customer DeKalb Cares program, the plumbing repair program. Zach, you could take that one if you want, just to help folks understand that we do have programs and want to continue to have programs to support plumbing repairs for individuals who don't have the funds to do the repairs themselves.
Sure, Commissioner. So starting at the beginning of 2024, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, they required all publicly owned water treatment systems to do an inventory of their water pipe and the water pipe to the ratepayer or the customers. DeKalb County, we completed the inventory of the water pipe of the public side, and we have not found pipe with lead or pipe made of lead in DeKalb County. That was a little easy for us to do there. We also had to go to every school system and check every school system for lead pipe as well. We had to present a report to the EPA EPD stating our findings, and that report was due October 16th of 2024. The second part of that request from the EPA was to assess the private homeowners' houses to understand or to get an understanding on how many houses in the area may have lead pipe. The plumbing in your individual homes, it's privately owned by the homeowner. And DeKalb County doesn't have the right to go in anyone's home, and we don't have as-built to understand what it is. That letter was sent to the EP. That letter was required to be sent out to the ratepayers by the EPA, and the letter was supposed to communicate that, hey, your home may potentially have lead pipe. We don't know it for certain, but to be on the safe side, it's in your best interest to identify the type of pipe in your home. And what we did on our DeKalb County Watershed website, we posted some information on how you could potentially, as a homeowner, identify your pipe yourself. And typically, as Commissioner stated, from 1960s up to 1979, there was no regulation on lead pipe. So if your house was built before 79 or say before 1980, there's a possibility that you may have lead pipe in your home. You can hire a professional plumber or someone to come out to do an inspection in your property, and they could potentially give you that information. But again, we have information on our website for you to do a self-assessment of your pipe. And if you do have it, we're not mandating that you do anything to your system. You don't have to do anything, but it would be recommended that if you have lead pipe, that you consider updating your system.
Great. Thank you, Director Hayes. If you don't mind, if you could find that link and put it in the chat for folks to be able to, see if there's some how-tos on how to do self-inspection and any advice. But Zach, do you want to speak about plumbing repair?
We're also going to put the DeKalb Cares link in the chat. And DeKalb Cares, for everyone's information, is a program that we established probably 3-4 years ago. And it really resulted from us seeing many instances of high bills that were caused by leaks, and leaks that people simply couldn't afford to repair. So we initiated the program right around the same time of COVID, and it gave us an opportunity to allocate funds so that people who have income eligible folks can apply for the DeKalb Cares program. And it's a host of areas where they can have plumbing assistance addressed, private sewer lateral remediation if there's issues with their laterals, water leak that I mentioned, and then certain issues that may have been attributed from inclement weather, pipes freezing, breaking, and things like that. So the information is in the chat, but it's one of the programs that we are proud that we have initiated. And quite frankly, much like the other citizen assistance programs, we want to be a utility that's not simply charging rates and operating the system. We want to also address the needs of those persons who have difficulty paying, so that we have a customer base that knows that we care. Thus, DeKalb Cares.
Great. Thank you, Zach. And yes, would definitely encourage everyone to check that out. I think one individual was concerned about repair if she had to go in and replace her lead pipes or even get it tested, I guess. And so that program was established. I believe, Zach, it was under was it ARP funded? Is that correct?
Yes. Initial funding was from ARP.
Okay. And I think we talked about this the other day, but approximately how much is left in that program in terms of dollars?
Right. There's not a lot left. I think we started with about $5 million, and there's less than $500,000 left. But like so many programs, I would anticipate we will need to replenish in order to maintain the programs going forward.
Yep, absolutely. And that's something that I want everyone to be aware of, because every January to March, the Board of Commissioners and the CEO work to establish our annual operating budgets. And so to the extent that folks would like to see us continue to support the DeKalb Cares program, and particularly the plumbing repair program, please let us know, and certainly, email us or just let your concerns and support for that be known. We definitely want to hear it. Okay, we have a few more hands raised. We're going to go a little bit beyond our time here, but I want to make sure we get all the hands raised before we close out this evening. Let's go to Dr. Jackie Eccles. All right, go ahead, Jackie. You should be on.
Yep.
Yes, hey, go right ahead.
Okay. Thanks. I have a quick question. We've heard a lot about the consent decree in DeKalb County. And the consent decree is broken out into priority and non-priority areas. There is a date to fix the sewer system in priority areas. That date is 2027, which primarily covers some areas outside of North DeKalb, but primarily North DeKalb. But my question is about the non-priority area, which is primarily in South DeKalb County. And on the priority fix list, which came out of the last negotiation between DeKalb County and EPA, there are about 55 sites, chronic sites, I think, that are in South DeKalb County, which does not account for the entire 1,750 miles of sewer and 1,750 miles of water pipe. So my question is, how is DeKalb County going to ensure that there's equity between the infrastructure, water and sewer in South DeKalb County and in North DeKalb County, since obviously the priority, non-priority area configuration was set up for some reason. I mean, well, I don't really get the goal, I can imagine, but given that we have it, and it's kind of self-explanatory, how is the infrastructure going to be in non-priority areas be upgraded?
Okay, great question. Director Hauser, do you want to, or Zach, do you want to take us?
Sure. So there, Dr. Eccles mentioned a couple of things. The priority areas were initially designated based on a series of factors. In other words, if there were spills occurring in particular areas, if there were breaks or fog being issued, as well as the age of the pipe. So as you can imagine, in the Polbridge Basin, it's newer to the DeKalb County wastewater system. So they ranked lower, whereas the older portions, the portions of the system where you may have pipes that are almost 100 years old, they ranked higher. So you had that one ranking where, to help the county focus on the areas with the most need and address those spill areas and those sensitive areas first. That's one. The second requirement under the consent decree that Dr. Eccles mentioned were the priority fix list items. And those are simply a list of spills. So in other words, we're getting sewers out of the system into the community that have occurred at a particular location more than once in a year. And it has to be within a couple of, 100 yards of spills of each other. And that does another good thing for the community. It causes the DeKalb County to focus on areas where the community are actually experiencing spills occurring multiple times in the same area, and requiring us under the modified consent decree to address those spills within a specific timeline. So for instance, if a spill occurs, it was raining today, let's say if a spill occurs on First Street and Main, and that spill had occurred earlier this year, that spill will go on the priority fix list, and the county would have to fix or address the root cause of that spill within a 2-year period from the date it occurred. So the new deadline for that area being fixed would be 2 years from when it occurred again. So I just wanted to first level set as to the terminology Dr. Eccles was using, the priority area, and then secondarily, the priority fix list. And they both have differing deadlines to address. Dealing with equality, As you could see with the priority fix list, that's essentially where spills have actually occurred more than once, whether it's in North DeKalb, South DeKalb, East DeKalb, West DeKalb, that has to be certain time frame. And that continues similarly for the priority fix list, which has a deadline. But as far as addressing Dr. Eccles' direct question as to what will happen with the other areas, there is a document called the OSARP. It is listed online. And the good news is DeKalb County, we post our semi-annual and annual reports online, and that gives us the actual feedback as to what's going on in the OSARP or other than the priority areas and the activity and work that's taking place there. Commissioner Terry, you may recall before the PWI committee, we recently had a couple of months ago contracts to deal with the OSARP. And breaks or assessment work that has happened in the OSARP that we're dealing with repairs going forward in the coming years. So I hope that answers Dr. Eccles' question. One, there are updates in the semi-annual and annual reports. The PWI committee has recently voted on estimates because as far as assessment goes, we have reached to assessing 87% of all the sewer in DeKalb County. So we have a good idea as to what's happening, not just in the priority areas, but also in the other areas of the county. And in a similar fashion to the PSARP document, which is how we do the capital improvement in the priority areas, you have the OSARP document, which is posted online as to how we deal with repairs in the other areas.
Great. Thank you, Maria. Dr. Eccles, did that answer your question?
Absolutely, it didn't, but I didn't expect anything different. Anything that's that convoluted when it comes to a consent decree should raise the level of inquiry, by anyone who lives in the county. The city of Atlanta has been under a consent decree for 30 years, and the kind of convoluted different documents and nomenclature used in the DeKalb just kind of raises the question. And I won't take up any more time, but eventually I'm going to ask that question and we can figure out, since we're talking sewers and getting them fixed, and everybody has a right, every citizen has a right to the same kind of functioning sewer and water system, how we can eventually get our heads around this notion of priority and non-priority areas so that all citizens in the county are treated the same way. That's all I'm getting at. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Eccles. I'll put you back in the queue there. And yes, I do want to just acknowledge that the consent decree really does feel like a moving target. You fix some areas and then some other ones pop up. And I think that's one of the nature of our system, is that there are so many priority areas waiting to be identified because they're 1 month or 1 year away from busting open and becoming a priority area. And so I think, Maria, you're acknowledging that it's complicated. There's a lot of lists. There's priority, there's secondary areas. Generally speaking, we'd like to get to it all. We're only limited by the amount of money that we have on an annual basis. And this brings us to why we're having this discussion now, because we're at that point where these priority fix areas got to get done. And we know that there's more lurking around the corner that we'll have to fix eventually. On maybe a kind of a little bit brighter note, and Dr. Eccles had asked about this earlier in the chat about a Snapfinger Advanced Wastewater Treatment Plant. Director Hayes, do you have an update for folks on the status of the advanced wastewater treatment plant down in South DeKalb in the Snapfinger Basin, which is our largest basin for the gravity sewer? So Polebridge is a very small part. Atlanta, has its part, but Snapfinger is is the big one. But please give us some good news on that very important investment.
Sure, Commissioner. We are wrapping up construction, and we are actually adding sewer to the new plant and allowing the new plant to process sewer. And we're going through a test phase. We have to do what they call a 30-day test and then a 90-day test to come up with substantial completion. We are now in that test phase, and we're doing quite well. So we're hoping to complete this test phase very soon and announce a ribbon cutting or somewhat here in the very near future. But we're definitely operating the facility, testing out all of the equipment, and we're hoping to go to substantial completion soon.
Great. Thank you, Director Hayes. And of course, once the sewage is treated at Snapfinger, it is then released into the South River, much cleaner than, of course, it started out. But I know I'll link the link about the more details on this treatment center. But can you just speak about the technology that's being used to treat the sewage and the quality of the water that is actually being released into the South River?
Sure, Commissioner. I can share the old plant. While it was old, we were running out of capacity, but we have always met, or actually not met, but exceeded the federal and state requirements for the water that we release into the community. But what this new facility will do for us is to allow us to even further exceed. We have built what you call a membrane treatment facility, and this membrane treatment facility, it will clean water to almost drinking water quality that it will release. And one of the great things about this facility, it is to date the largest facility of its kind in the United States, and possibly the third, maybe fourth largest in the world.
Great. All right. Well, that's progress. And that cost a lot of money to build. Am I right about how much money did we spend on that plant?
Yes, Commissioner, that budget was just near $300 million.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you for that figure. Okay, we're going to try to get to our last little 4 hands up. And so I see we've got Eric on. Hey, Eric, good to see you on the Zoom here, and you can unmute yourself if you can. All right, and Eric, you're unmuted.
Hello.
Hello. Hey, Eric, how you doing?
Hey. The waiver. What on the?
How about the waiver where you live?
The waiver. The waiver.
The waiver? The
waiver. Yeah.
You saying waiver?
No, waiver.
River?
Yeah.
What river, friend?
What on the?
Over here in Clarkson?
Yeah. You remember you and me we got that with the waiver. All the garbage go in the river.
Talking about the garbage in the river?
Yeah.
Friend, you gotta refresh my memory.
No, you.
Oh.
Okay.
I
know your aide is there, Eric, and so go ahead with was it about the garbage in the river you said?
What are you talking? What are you talking?
Yeah.
All right. I think I got that, Eric, but if you want, you could type it in as well, and we could answer your question. And actually, Director Hayes, would you mention, because I know this is a project that Watershed worked on with the trash trap that we have put on one of the creeks, and I think maybe we were hopefully doing some more creeks to catch trash that floats, mostly from upstream. But Director Hayes, do you want to speak about is it called the Trash Bandit? I can't remember what it's called.
So the I guess the brand name is the Bandalon, Bandalong, and it's a device that we have placed in the South River, and its purpose is to capture any floating debris that may come down the river so that we can pull out any excessive balls, toys, shopping carts, yeah, tree limbs, plastics, those things. So yes, in 2022, we had the trash trap put into the South River, and we have it operational where we are capturing anything that comes down the South River through the Snapfinger Basin, and we pull that trash out and send it to the landfill.
Great, thank you. And Eric, hopefully we answered your question, but if not,
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for joining, Eric. We'll see you in Clarkston real soon, I'm sure, at the coffee shop. And thank you so much for your advocacy. I'll put you back into the queue, and certainly just feel free to reach out if you have any more questions. All right. Met Eric 10 years ago when I was mayor of Clarkston as a young man, and he's all grown up now, and he's doing great. So it was really great to have Eric on. All right, let's go to Martha Gross. All right, Martha, you're on. Go right ahead.
Mine's a quick one. A lot of areas do. Hey, is there a reverberation?
No, I hear you.
Okay. A lot of areas do impact fees, and national developers are used to impact fees. Why don't we do them in DeKalb?
Yeah, that's a great point, Martha. I believe that there's sort of maybe two ways to look at it. One, there's the quote unquote impact fee of like establishing new service. So they call it the tap fee. And so every new customer, water and sewer, if they're establishing an account, there might be a quote unquote tap fee to establish that service. And so that's kind of like an impact fee. However, there is state law that allows sort of a broader set of impact fees from new development. It is something that actually would require it's sort of like you have to do an impact fee study, which could take about a year. And so currently several commissioners have discussed the idea of initiating the study to understand exactly what an impact fee could be in terms of where it would, like what particular areas it would impact, the amount it would, be in terms of the quote unquote fee, and then how much, of course, money it could raise, and then how that money could be spent. So totally agree. I think impact fees are something that we can look at. And you're exactly right. Other jurisdictions have used it, usually more for like transportation or other sort of infrastructure cost as it relates to like, more cars or more people, on a roadway, for instance. Does that answer your question?
I'm in commercial real estate, and I also have a master's in economic development. And I've heard the argument in DeKalb that, hey, we want all the development we can get. But my experience is quality developers that are used to doing large subdivisions and other, office buildings or retail centers, like Lula Hills, for example. I mean, they're used to major impact fees. And if it's a concern about impact fees for water, setting up infrastructure, whatever it is, water is an infrastructure. It doesn't have to be transportation. But the idea is that if you did something like that and there was a problem and you're afraid you're scaring away development, maybe you decide DeKalb and start helping with certain projects you really want on those impact fees or whatever you're going to do. There's ways to mitigate if it's a project you really want, but I don't think it scares most developers off. It's just an opinion, and it might help mitigate some of the damage to our low income residents. So.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Martha. No, that's a great suggestion and something we should definitely look at. And I think the point is well taken that, if we simply rely 100% of the revenues that we need to do these repairs just on the rate base, then we would have to really have much higher rates. And so I think what Maria and Zach and Director Hayes have laid out is that over the last 2 years, we really have tried to maximize grants, low interest loans, and just other savings that they pointed out to see what we can get done before the rate increase has to go up. And so we're at a point now where we've maximized a lot of those savings. However, we do believe that there's opportunities in the future for grants. We hope and hope and hope that Congress, despite talking about cutting $2 trillion from the federal government, which doesn't seem practical, would and we'll be lobbying Congress. We're going to be up in DC in February lobbying our members of Congress and the White House and everybody through NACO, our National Association of County Officials, to please, please, please think about local jurisdictions that have water and sewer infrastructure needs. This is something that's not just about DeKalb County, but it's about America. We have crumbling infrastructure all over America. And the infrastructure bill that Joe Biden passed in the last few years has been tremendously helpful. A lot of grants, ARP money, CARES Act money, that has really helped the county pay for multi-million and tens of millions of dollars of projects that otherwise would have had to been borne by the ratepayer. And so that's something that we're keeping in mind is really how many different sources of revenue and other funding and savings can we realize so that we minimize as much as possible the impact on the ratepayer and certainly those who are the most vulnerable ratepayers. So thank you, Martha. I'll put you back into the queue. All right, and we just got a few more, so we'll take our last three here. I got Martha, Kat, and then Jamie, and I'll pull on Martha here. Go right ahead, Martha, you're on. Just go unmute yourself there. You got Martha Jackson. I should say Martha Jackson. All right, we'll wait for Martha to unmute herself. Let me go ahead and pull in Kat. Go ahead, Kat. If you're there, unmute yourself.
Hey, can you hear me?
We hear you. Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, yeah, thanks so much for having the town hall. I just figured I'd go ahead and read my question in the Q&A since it seemed like we moved along to live questions. But just thinking about a lot of people's interest in the consent decree and kind of breaking down the understanding of the priority areas and non-priority areas, and given that there are, a few breaks per day on average, just thinking about the transparency of that for residents, and knowing where their money was going and knowing how their own neighborhood fared in terms of how all their sewer pipes were doing. If the county would be open to publishing some sort of interactive map that included the list of repairs that needed to happen. And then I was saying as for reporting in kind of real or faster time, maybe the practicality of that water billing board being empowered for residents to be able to report newer breaks, and then that could then be added to that map. So residents in general just have like an idea of where their immediate community is in terms of their sewer repairs.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a great idea. Zach, is that something that we could ask Director Greer at GIS?
And yes, Kat, once again, thank you for another good idea. We do that sort of thing with SPLOST, and I do believe it's doable in this context. We capture all that information and we send it in on reports, but we don't have interactive maps at this time. But yeah, give us a couple months. I'm sure we can put something up because we have the data.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I feel like it would clear up a lot of confusion that it seems like people are having, and kind of make it easier for people to keep up to date. So appreciate that.
Yes, absolutely. No, I think that's a really good idea. And I think, just to the conversation earlier in the program, I definitely have great, sympathy and empathy for residents who don't feel that they have enough information. They don't know where to get the documents. They don't know, how to interpret the documents. And I'll just speak from someone who used to be on the outside just as an advocate and a regular citizen trying to also understand these things from the benefit, from sort of just like the public side. And even as a commissioner and even, spending every week with Director Hayes and Maria and Dianne and Zach, I'm still learning things myself after 4 years and I guess like 11 years in public service. And so I'm a big believer in as much, not just like transparency, like here's a website, go read a 100-page document, but transparency in the sense of, well, here's a way to digest it, and I love maps. I think, just understanding, Kat, like where they are, what's been approved, what's on the list for next year, zooming into your neighborhood or your part of the county to see, okay, this is where my water line, my sewer line that feeds my neighborhood, may or may not be on the list. And, it's possible your neighborhood might be totally fine, right? But you might be in one where there might be work coming up. So I love that idea of transparency with a map. And then, probably having more like town halls like this so we can just like go through the questions. Because sometimes you just got to ask your question, have it verbalized, and have some graphics and figures. So Zach, that's something I think we can work on, right?
I like it. I like it. And so typically we do town halls and such when we have an issue, if we're about to do a major, upgrade or something like that. But sometimes just having check-ins is not a bad idea too, just to keep everyone, on the same page. I know a number of folks asked, how do we know if the money is invested appropriately, or how can we hold the government to getting the work done? So maybe if we just schedule quarterly check-ins to give updates on where we are with things for whoever's interested. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, and I will say something that I think was sort of a conversation from Kat and several other our advocate groups about how our advisory boards that are made up of citizens that we appoint, representing the people, sort of operate when it comes to watershed and sewer related issues. And so the one thing that the commissioners have discussed and are moving forward on next year, early next year, is to reconstitute the purpose of what has been the Watershed Billing Advisory Board. This board was set up, Zach, like several years ago when the water billing issue was the main issue, to really be a board to have a little bit of extra oversight over, hey, how many bill complaints did we get this month? And let's track it every single month to see the trend lines. And the good news that, I've, after attending these meetings and watching them for several years, is that a lot of the billing complaints with like high water bills, we've gotten them down into the single and double digits every month. And that's tremendous progress, Zach, right? From what I think before was thousands.
Oh, absolutely.
Every month. And so the Watershed Billing Advisory Board, made up of appointees, citizens that sit and hear, the reports, they don't have as much to do lately because we're doing a good job on the watershed billing front. And so we want to keep that going, keep that report coming. But as we move into this, potential 3 to 10 years of more work, this board can expand a little bit to be sort of a place where there can be regular updates, regular town halls, where folks who have particular issues can bring their issues not just to commissioners, not just to the watershed department, but to the advisory board that ostensibly is there to represent the people and to be one more layer of transparency and accountability that I think would really serve us all well. Because a lot of times the issues I think that many of us have is we're not getting clear answers or clear information. And I do believe that's sort of process driven. It just takes time to learn the issues. It takes time to understand how they're going to impact you. And so that's kind of our role, working with, our advocates and our residents to make sure that we create digestible information so folks understand it, but also a forum to bring grievances, to bring complaints, questions, ideas. And so, Kat, you gave us a good idea. I know there's more ideas out there. I think we got a couple from the Q&A about, technologies and other things that we can be doing to be more innovative in our watershed and our sewer work. So thank you for that. Is there anything else, Kat, that you wanted to say or any follow-up?
No, unless there was anything you wanted me to talk about. I was just kind of here to listen and, let all of the residents kind of have their time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I just, I appreciate you and DeKalb Water Watch and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund for meeting with, all of us here on the call for many months to talk through some of the protections and the shut-off protection, as well as the ability for lower income residents to be protected from those shut-offs, as well as the rate increases. And so thank you for just advocating, and, we're going to continue this conversation into January, as we mentioned. So we'll look forward to more of those discussions.
Yeah, happy to. And we're really, really excited to see the customer advocacy office, the shut-off protections for vulnerable residents, and the income, the lower income program advance. Those are all of our asks, and just to see them advancing, we think will really help residents. And we'll do our part as well to have town halls to help get the word out to people as well, to make sure we're doing our part to spread the word about the positive changes that are happening.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. I'll move back to the queue. All right. We got one more and then we'll wrap things up. And so let me pull on Mr. Jamie Dutro. Hey, Jamie, go right ahead.
Ted, thank you. Can you hear me
Yes,
there?
I can hear you. Go right ahead.
Okay, great. Appreciate it. I want to thank you guys for doing this, Mr. Williams, Mr. Hayes. It's been great to see you guys, and I appreciate the time that you put in on this. First of all, I want to ditto what Martha Gross said about impact fees. I'm working on a project in a nearby county that's it's about a $60 million construction project. They're dumping 4 million on top of that just to pay for a county lift station or a pump station that will benefit not just them but the rest of the area. And they're more than willing to pay for that. That's the kind of impact fee that these firms are they're more than willing to pay for that. And I think part of the reason we're in a deep hole right now is because for years and years, DeKalb has been so pro-growth, and we're bending over backwards and giving tax incentives even to developers that they should be paying or should have been paying for not just the maintenance, but the upsizing. So I think, as you said, where you've maybe had an 8-inch line in the past, you've upgraded it to a 10-inch line when you've replaced it. And so we've dug ourselves a hole because of that. And that time's over. I mean, not only does the infrastructure system for water and sewer suffer, but our traffic is horrible too. So it's kind of time to get over that. So that was my comment. I do want to mention that I sort of ditto also. I think it was Miss Pace having a forensic audit, because if we don't know what we're doing, what we've done wrong in the past, and I can vouch for a lot of personal experience on my own property for county. I want to be kind and say it's kind of incompetence, but it's redundancy. I've got 4 manholes on my property, and I've seen incredible stuff. But we need to know what we've done wrong in the past and how we can improve that. You need to benefit from lessons learned. So I'll let it go at that. I appreciate your time, and Ted, thank you so much for doing this. And
Great.
I'll say goodbye. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. All right, very good. Well, I appreciate everyone who has been with us the entire time. It was great to start with about 100 folks on the Zoom about 2 hours ago. And appreciations to everyone left who has stuck with us. And some of us joined for the first time. Others have been involved in DeKalb County for many, many years. So this is really about the future of DeKalb County. And for the folks, the old timers, which I'm kind of like one now because I've been here for going on 20 years now, Zach. So I think I'm an old timer now at this point. And for those who might be new to DeKalb County, we are committed to not only fixing the water and sewer issues, but we want to have the best system possible, the system that is going to be going to deliver the best services for our customers, going to ensure the cleanest environment for our waterways and riverways as possible, and at the same time do so in the most efficient way possible so that we minimize the impacts to our own pocketbooks. This is something that, regardless of, you being a single family home dweller, living in an apartment, owning a business, or, being a big hospital, everyone has to pay a water and sewer bill. Everyone is part of this system. And by working together and having these dialogues, I feel confident that we can not only achieve that vision, but do so in a way that's equitable and fair and transparent for all that are concerned. I want to thank COO Zach Williams. I want to thank Director McNabb, Dianne McNabb, Director Maria Hauser, and Director David Hayes for your time this evening. We will work through some of the questions that we got ahead of time, and we will put out an email with this recording link for folks to review those answers to those questions, as well as listen to this again if you want. And again, we will be continuing this discussion into the new year. So please stay tuned in second week of January, third week, fourth week of January. That's going to be a very busy time for us to pick up this conversation as the committee and as the new commissioners and new CEO come into their office and begin to work and roll their sleeves up with all of us to work through these issues. So thank you again. Everyone have a great rest of your Tuesday, rest of your week, and we will see you real soon. Thanks again. Have a great one.